Welcome to EIPIP meeting 33. I'm Pooja Ranjan. So the first item on the agenda is statements regarding trademark. I have added this item from the last meeting. There was some discussion. This is in continuation to that. Wondering if there is any word on it. And another question is, should it be on the agenda anymore? So I don't see Tim here, but Micah Lightland, if you guys have any word on that.
I do not have any insight beyond what's in the discussion on the EIP, I believe.
Right. Okay. So I'll keep it open. If we get something by the end of this meeting today, that's fine. And if we don't have to put it on the agenda anymore, I'll remove it. So let's move on. The next item is, should external link be allowed in the EIP? So this has been coming up here and there, and in some cases of EIP as well as in some cases of ERCs. Because we have active editors in this meeting, it will be good to hear some thoughts that may be helpful for authors who are pushing proposals. Like when we are talking about external ink, or what is the definition that we want to put in? That's number one. And number two, if there is any reference link, would that be, reference link means a client implementation I'm referring to particularly, would that be counted as an external link as well?
So, just for some backstory, in case someone's watching this afterwards, the EIP editors, there's very few of us, and we're very resource constrained, so time constrained. And it's very easy to implement rules that are very strict, such as no external links. Like, that's an easy rule. If you see an external link, you just say no. Whereas external links that are the other two options are just allow all external links. The problem with that is we found that people often use EIPs as a form of advertising, sort of, where they have a product they're trying to build, and they create an EIP that defines their product, and then they link to their product over and over and over in the EIP. And so if we allow all external links, we end up with a number of EIPs that end up following that pattern. And there's a worry, at least for me, that if we continue to allow that behavior, then we're just going to get overrun by these people that are looking to advertise. And then the middle ground, of course, is to use some sort of judgment, like the editors would use judgment and say, okay, this is an acceptable link, that's not an acceptable link. The problem with that one is due to the limited resources available to EIP editors, time-wise. It's very, very time consuming to do case-by-case judgments like that. For one, because just the mental effort of making a judgment is hard. Like, you have to follow the link, you have to see what it goes to, try to gauge what the quality of the source is. And then on top of that, you have to deal with people that say, well, you let someone else include an external link, why can't I have my external link? And you have to fight people on it. So historically, I've been going with the just no external links rule, and I was very rigid on it and just said, if there's an external link, not allowed. The one exception I've let through is RFC links. So RFCs are a standard by another standards organization, and they are very stable over time. They've shown throughout history, like they've lasted decades, and we already have them all over the place in the EIP's repo. Recently, though, there's been a lot of pushback on that, and so I think the culmination of all that pushback is we're going to go with the other option, which is to let editors put whatever they want in their EIPs, and we'll just see how bad it gets. We have some long-term ideas for how to address that problem, like such as switching EIP's repo, like getting rid of it, or getting rid of core EIPs in favor of a concrete specification that is updated via pull requests. In such situations, there's much less room for people to put external links, and they make much less sense. And so this problem might just go away on its own if we can ever achieve that. And it's also possible that my fears will not be borne out, and there will be a handful of people that use EIPs for advertising, but they'll be few and far between. So I think, unless someone feels otherwise, I think that's more or less where we're at.
So when you say for advertising, I mean, I am considering that is not the case with the core proposal, that is in case of ERCs, right? So can we have a kind of fine line between the EIPs and ERCs here? Like when we are talking about Ethereum client implementation, we can have certain rules and we can define the external links over there. And when we are talking about ERCs kind of proposals, then we may or may not allow the link from the particular GitHub repository. I mean, if that's just a proposal. What do other editors think on that?
So once we get ERCs and EIPs split apart, then I start caring far less about what the ERC's repo does, and I'm totally fine with a separate set of rules there. As long as they're kind of together, it feels easier to have one set of rules rather than have separate two sets of rules. In the past, we've had kind of separate rules for ERCs versus EIPs, and it led to a lot of confusion for users because you had this kind of branching, like, okay, if you're this kind of EIP, then you need to follow these rules. If you're this kind of EIP, you need to follow those rules. And we have strived to kind of condense those into one path, like the whole thing with having draft, review, last call, final. We used to have that branch a lot more based on the EIP type. And I think that just led to a lot of confusion for users. And so I have a weak preference for not having different rules until we have the systems actually split apart, which hopefully is soon. But I could be convinced away from that if other people feel strongly.
I think there should be some sort of consistency. So if we do start branching off, we should really think about the intention behind it and the benefit there would be versus keeping things unified.
I think there should be flexibility that the EIP editors can pick and choose which links to do. But I do hear the concern about the time constraint, so I don't think we should declare that right now. I think if we get more, once the EIP and ERC repos are split apart, and once we've hired more EIP and ERC editors, then I think it would be good to say the EIP or ERC editors, whichever rule sets they have, can define if something's being too much advertising or if something is, if a link is not applicable to an EIP or an ERC. I think giving that structure, that's kind of, in my opinion, kind of part of the scope of an EIP editor is to make it sure it's, the specs are clean and don't deviate too far from necessary links.
I think in general, links can bring utility. Obviously, they could put links in the discussions to section, but those could get lost. I mean, it would have utility in the case where someone has done external research, doesn't want to include it in the EIP to upload it, and they just link to it as a reference. Like, I think having evidence, like additional evidence to support an EIP is beneficial. For like you said, having just links that are advertisements or product, I don't think that's desirable for the EIP's repo. So I can see the benefit of it, but I do think that it needs some policing. That makes sense.
I guess one example that I think of is like an ERC to say we want to improve we want to improve the token standard ERC20. So I need to link to these 4 papers that talk about quote attacks on ERC20. Like, where would that fall, Micah? Would that be, because that sounds like something that would be justification within the EIP for the EIP for the ERC to get approved?
So I tell people one of two things, or both usually. One is that the EIPs are specifications and standards. This is not they're not the right place to argue a point. So like when you define a standard, you say, okay, these are the rules. Somewhere else, you can convince someone you should follow rules A instead of rules B. And this is kind of just the rules bit, not the arguments. The motivation section obviously speaks against this, and often the motivation section is where the most conflict comes in, is because people want to use the motivation section for to put forth like a big argument for why this should happen. And my personal opinion is for a standard repo, that's not really the appropriate place to argue for your thing. The standards repo's job is to define a thing, not to say whether the thing is good or bad, or to assign moral value to it. It's just to define it. That being said, a lot of people want to use the EIP process for more than just standardization. They want to use it for like consensus building and discussion and arguments and, putting forth the why. And I think that's where a lot of the conflict comes from, is the question of, is the EIP's repo a standards repo? Like, is it just a place to store standards and specifications? Or is this a place for like kind of more broad discussion and more broad like information storage, if that makes sense?
I feel like one of the reasons that is so prevalent is that there isn't a great way of building consensus and arguing for standards outside of the EIPIP. Yes, there's the discussions to form, but you can have different people ask the same question, every month, and you have hundreds of posts to go through. It's not really the latest and greatest of the thinking of the author, and there's no good mechanism to have that. And so it's kind of the only, I feel like in an ideal world, there would be no motivation. It would be purely a spec, and there would be a group of people working on the standardization. And I want to think about ERCs mainly because I think that EIPs, we kind of already have that for core EIPs. This is the all core devs call. We have general agendas of things that we want. And so there's a lot of work on the specification outside of it. And there's, I think, a lot less need for the motivation. But for ERCs, there's no group that's sort of thinking, what does the community need in terms of standards that's going to improve the interoperability and make Ethereum better? It's just mainly projects who think, oh, I need to extend NFTs in this way for my project. Maybe other people will benefit from that. Let me throw in 15 links to my project.
Yeah, you guys are talking about consensus building. That's exact, and having summaries of all the discussions that are going on and tracking the people's latest, greatest current thought. That's exactly what Canonizer is designed to do. You create a camp that's a petition that you want to build consensus around, and people that agree with you can basically sign the petition, and the petition can constantly improve, and anyone who disagrees with that can create a competing camp, and all of that kind of stuff is designed to be handled at Canonizer, just FYI.
So have you discussed with some of the EIP authors about using Canonizer?
Yeah, a little bit, and I've been trying to reach out and recruit them to help do that, but they just think I'm just shilling our product and stuff like that. And it's hard to communicate that Canonizer can do that, and that's what Canonizer's for. It's a consensus building and tracking tool. But
got it. Okay.
But when I feel like it's
more, I feel like it's more than just building consensus. It's to me, that's the approach right now is more reactive. People come out and they say, hey, maybe this is a good standard, and then everybody reacts to the standard to try and say, oh, is this good or bad? Where I think we need, I'm talking again about ERCs. I think things need to be more proactive in terms of ERCs. These are things that we think in the future, some group of people who do a lot of smart contract development, these are things that we think can improve interoperability. Let's work together and try and build standards around this rather than, and there always needs to be an avenue for outside submissions. And this is exactly how RFCs work. Generally, there's groups of people who are working together on standards that's going to improve the internet, improve software in general. And then there's always the ability for outsiders to submit things and then onto that circle and work together. And we kind of have that with core EIPs. There's clearly this all core devs call that's happening every 2 weeks, and there's core developers who are thinking, in terms of where we want to go with the core protocol, what sort of EIPs do we need? Okay, well, there's a DDoS attack that's possible, and we want to go to stateless, so let's introduce access lists and these things, and let's build EIPs around that. And that makes sense, but we have nothing like that for ERCs. There's no group of people thinking, hey, we really need to build out this ERC 721 standard. This is really big and important. Let's work together and figure out how to do that.
I think we went a little on the other item of the agenda. So let's first conclude this one, and then we'll go to the ERCs in general that is listed as the next item. So if I understand correct, as for now, the general consensus is around let authors add whatever reference to link they would want to add in the proposal for both EIPs and ERCs. When we have a separate process set for ERCs, if and when, then maybe we will discuss on that part. But for now, it seems like we are in consensus to allow them to put whatever in the proposal. Even I was looking into EIP 1, it says that, like if I may read, each EIP that is referenced in an EIP must be accompanied by a relative markdown link for the first time, if it is referenced, and may be accompanied by a link on subsequent references. So I don't see any hard and fast rule mentioned in there as such, and I hope people are in agreement to let it be like that. If I'm missing on anything, please correct me.
That sounds right to me. I just wanted to add at the end, though, that as we hire on EIP and ERC editors, getting their opinion and getting their bandwidth and seeing how they want to do this, I think it's a good thing to revisit in the future. So it doesn't have to be something that's like in stone.
Right. Yeah, obviously. So yeah, my main intent here was to get some clarity here. So there is no change, whatever is mentioned here as in EIP 1 as of now, and we will revisit on this topic later on. So moving on, the next item on the agenda is ERC. So we have been discussing this ERC and EIP report, having a separate report for both of those. This is on the agenda for past few meetings, and there are a lot of back and forth. All these discussions can be found on the issue that is link is provided in the item. As for the last meeting, we were discussing to reach to the right person to create an ERC repo, but in light of some new comments, there could be some new options that can be explored. So yeah, I'm opening the floor for anyone who would like to speak to this. I saw some comments from, latest comment from Light Client that you had some different thoughts. Maybe you would want to explain.
Yeah, I was just thinking I hadn't really thought about it in this way before, but if we move to becoming more spec driven and for the core development, then I think that's going to mostly remove the need for EIPs, for core EIPs. And so then at that point, what is the EIP repository doing? And so I was thinking maybe it doesn't make sense to split out the ERCs at that point. Maybe it makes sense to just let the ERCs sort of take over the EIP repository. Because otherwise we risk, splitting out ERCs and then moving to spectrum and development without EIPs. And now we're redirecting everyone who wants to look at ERCs to a different repo. And I think that's going to be problematic.
I agree with the caveat that my caveat only on the time frames. So I'm concerned that we might not actually move to spec-driven core development for 3 to 5 years, and it means we're suffering with ERC EIP combination for 3 to 5 years, or however long it takes.
Yeah, I just don't know how long it's going to take to have some sort of spec. I wish that there was a way that could be prioritized.
Yeah,
I think there are people who can
hire someone for it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a full Ethereum implementation in Python, the Trinity client, and it's really a matter of removing the software engineering from it to make it a great client, and then making it into more of a very readable format for a specification. And I would love to move to a future where we don't have we don't fracture the consensus test across multiple repos. We just have, the ETH1 specs repo. We have a testing folder, and that has all the test vectors. Because I think that E2 has really done a great job with how they have written the spec as code, and they have the test vectors in the same repo that they can actually run against the spec. And if we can get to that point, that's going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree with the trajectory. I think that starting the Trinity client is very reasonable because it's probably the closest client to something that's written that is what we want. But I suspect there's still a whole lot of work to take out all the optimizations, basically. Like we're basically saying, take Trinity and make it not work as an actual live client in favor of readability.
Yeah, there's two. I think I've been chatting with different people about this over the past few months. There's like two approaches you can do. One is you take Trinity and you simplify it, and then the other approach is you take the yellow paper and you transcribe it in Python or some readable or you don't need to transcribe it line per line, but you kind of rewrite the yellow paper in Python. I think the challenge for either of those is finding people who want to do that, one, and two, whose purpose is to actually help with the kind of EIP and ETH1 specs process. So there's some folks who are, looking at rewriting the yellow paper, for example, but they're more interested in just analysis and not necessarily the EIP process. There's obviously kind of the Trinity team who has written the Python client, but I don't think they're interested in kind of adapting it to be more of a spec. If anyone knows like an engineer who would like to make that kind of their focus, like write a Python spec for Ethereum, either based on Trinity or on the yellow paper, I can probably help coordinate funding or, like getting some reviews on it and whatnot. But it seems like finding a person who wants to do this work, who has the skill to do it, and whose main motivation is the EIP process and not like some tangent where it might end up being useful to the EIP process, that's been hard.
Yeah, that's fair. Have you heard anything else from Paul regarding this?
No, so I think, he's looking at kind of rewriting the yellow paper in Python, but he wants to stick to the yellow paper as closely as possible. So I think the two options are, we wait for Paul's work, we see, how close or far that is from what we do, and maybe it's quite easy to refactor that. Then the other option is you take Trinity and you just start from that. But I suspect Paul's direction is like coordinated with what we want, but it's not the exact same thing.
I might float this idea with some people, depending. I'm curious to see what the apprenticeship program yields in terms of people, because I'm seeing a wide range. Some people say they have 10 years of experience in software engineering and they're kind of newer to Ethereum. And so there might be some people who have good Python skills and going through the spec and fully implementing it in a simple way where you don't need to do, because a lot of Ethereum isn't the most complicated thing in the world, but I think that especially when it comes to how to lay out the database and efficiently do a lot of things, it becomes problematic. And if they don't have to do that, it might be an interesting project.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
I can keep an eye on what they're up to.
Yeah,
and see if it makes sense at all.
You work in the same office as Piper right now, right? Like,
I'm gonna go see Piper today.
Okay,
so
So I think chat with him about that. That would be really valuable if somebody from that batch wanted to take it on. And it might be also like so one of Piper's concerns with that program is, how much people can like actually help these, onboard new people to the process. But this feels like it might be kind of distinct enough from like core development that, if we can get different folks to help with reviews and whatnot, it might be a way to get somebody to like increase the total capacity.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So
You guys have an office?
They do.
It's used as for different purposes, but the Snake Charmers meet up there every week or so. So I just come up here and work with them.
I see.
So coming back to the question here, what is the time period that we see here with this migration, considering we get people to write their specs for Ethereum, and we would eventually move on to the PR-based system that we are talking about. If we talk about this EIPs and ERC, how long is the period that we think that switch is going to happen? Like if it is more than a year, in my mind, it's worth considering have a separate repo if that is a kind of issue for many people. But if it is like less than that, then we can let it be. What do people think on this?
I think that if we had someone on staff right now who was a competent engineer, knows Python, understands EIP or Ethereum protocol, I'd say 6 months before for full migration. More realistically, probably much longer, because we need to find someone, and the person we find, there's a good chance they will either not be an expert at Python or not be an expert at Ethereum, probably the latter. And so they'll have to learn on the way. And then, so I would assume, like, optimistically, like a year, pessimistically 3. These are all random guesses.
Yeah, a year is my, I'd say, realistic estimate. Like the time that we do it, I can see everything goes well and we have, like a draft of it by the end of the summer. But like the distance between 80% done and 100% done is probably another couple months, and then kind of switching the process over is probably another couple months. And then Cortez will be busy with the merge in the meantime. So yeah, I think a year is like things go reasonably well. Yeah, 3, I don't know. 3 years to me seems almost like we just don't do it, right? Like yeah.
So considering a year, like, do we like have the need of ERC repo as of now? Is a question that we might want to answer here, because if they do, then we would want to progress in that direction, getting a repo created and like process set up.
I'm weakly in favor still of splitting them out just because of the uncertainty.
I think I've walked back a little bit, and I would rather wait a few months and see if anything begins to materialize, because I would hate to get down that path where there's clearly an end in sight and we've already done quite a bit of work to move and redirect things. I don't really think there's a huge benefit of going 3 to 6 more months with ERCs out of the repository versus in.
Yeah, I think for the time being, I mean, if this is like general agreement, then for the time being, we can start making use of obviously the tags available in GitHub, although it's not going to help us with the notifications that we are receiving, but that would be something we can look into and work for the time being. And if people would like to revisit it after some time, I'm fine.
We need to hire a tiebreaker. Someone who's not like Client or me.
Here's the thing, if we want to push a thing, we need to have a champion for that. Like if we want to have an ERC repo, we want to have a maintainer of that repo. And like we need to have people owning the responsibility. If the task can be done being an EIP, I mean, having it in the EIP repo and that can be managed is fine. But if we have someone pushing it, then in my mind, it will make sense to move in the direction. Even if we start looking for people who can actually create a repo and we do not have any maintainer, that would be again an issue at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think not having an ERC editor right now, that would kind of be a weird reason to start the move before we have an ERC editor, right?
Well, it's kind of making it official that we don't have an ERC editor. 'Cause we already don't have an ERC editor. It's just they currently just sit as OpenPR.
Yeah, huh. Yeah, I don't have an opinion. Otherwise, I'd be the tiebreaker this time, but yeah, I don't have an opinion.
I don't think this
I'm okay.
decision should stop us from continuing to search for people to become part of the ERC process. And I'm happy when we find people to do that, to help work with them, to get them in a place where they can do it all on their own. I'm not going to be a great ERC editor because I don't write smart contracts and I don't interact with things in the DApp level.
Well, the good news is we are exploring funding options, Pooja and I, and we've made a lot of progress on that. I don't think that's in the agenda, and I don't know how much we want to say yet about where we're getting funding, but it's moving along.
Cool.
Yeah, actually, in a similar vein, the reason why I joined today is I've been doing some work with magicians, and the idea was floated to maybe have me move towards ERC editing. So I came in a bit late. I missed a bunch of the conversation, but it sounds like that would be really relevant right now. This is like a really, really, really fresh idea. It's not really scoped out in any way, shape, or form, but if there's any information I could offer with that, I'd be happy to.
You write smart
contracts.
contracts.
Someone leading that, yeah.
I do write smart contracts.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, you've told me that before. I don't know why I asked again, but I guess if everyone else didn't know, yeah, we're into smart contracts. So if that's the case, I'd be okay with you being like in training editor if you decide to go that path. I'd be in favor.
Oh, cool. I mean, I can't say I have like the best grasp of like exactly what would be in scope as an editor also. So like, I mean, I definitely am not looking for any kind of streamlined decision process on that. Just figured it'd probably be good if I signaled that there might be something like that, like, looming.
So, yeah, I see Annette's comment on that issue, proposing William to be an ERC editor. And I have also received a couple of more interest on the ECH Discord, people mentioning that they are interested to contribute as EIP and ERC editors. We will keep looking into this, like as I always mention it to people, that the best place to start with will be the EIP GitHub repo. And as like Kent also mentioned, that if they have any questions, it would be, like he is available, you can always go and ask for that. But the question that we started with is still here. Do we need a repo at this point? Should we think about it or should we drop it? Considering ERC editor is a second thing that we will keep doing it in parallel.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've won several recent bouts against Matt, so I'm okay with losing this one.
My ego thanks you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I mean, I wanted to have a clarity on this part because many things are dependent on it. So if we are clear that we are going to have these things like as it is for now, and maybe we will revisit it after 3 months, then we can start looking into it. But again, this is one thing that we were looking into. Another point that was mentioned today, and it is like a very important, the process of ERC. There are a lot of things that's not like streamlined. People are not getting proper attention. There is something that we might want to do in that direction. As for now, EIP1 is the reference for both EIPs and ERCs. Maybe we would want to add some more text focused on ERC that would be helpful for people to follow along. Having said that, I have listed ERC standard in the sub item. It's ERC 223. That is an open issue. I could not find any pull request for that, but I find that is being used as a standard for many other projects and many other proposals. this is a situation that I don't know how we should handle that. If a proposal which is not listed on eips.ethereum.org, should we call them as an ERC or should we not? Because I think the clarification on usage of terms is also important for people to understand what is a standard for Ethereum and what is just any issue that is randomly moving around.
I think things that define specifications at the application layer should be referred to as ERCs.
Do we want to wait for any standard to follow the standardization process that was defined, I think, 9 months or so ago? Like this is the process that every proposal has to undergo, EIPs and ERCs, to be called as a standard. And when that is added as a standard, it is available for community to use. Although community can use even if it is in the form of pull request or issue, but it's I feel it's important that we should give some clarity to them when we are actually calling it as a standard, because I don't want that people should write something in their own repo. I have seen an example that is there in their personal GitHub repo and they're calling it as EIP this.
So I tell people that until you reach final, you are not a standard. You're just an idea for a standard. And the reason for that is because we've frequently run into this problem in the past of people going out and implementing things before the standardization process finishes. ERC20 being the canonical example of that, where we had the ICO boom and 10 million tokens were created on the ERC20 standard before it was finished, and we all regret it now because the ERC20 standard is terrible because it was just like a first draft basically, and then everyone implemented the first draft, and then people came and reviewed it and were like, hey, this is not good. We have these problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. We need all these other features, and this is not great, but we're stuck with it. And so I try to strongly encourage people, don't go implementing these like just because something's in the EIP repo does not mean it's a good idea to implement it. Like, it has not been reviewed, it has not been vetted, there's not agreement on it until it reaches final. Of course, I can't stop people from doing things that are bad ideas, so it still happens anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just feel like we need, more leadership and more authority around the ERC process, because it's really just a free-for-all at the moment, and there's no cohesive plan or goals to move to and to things that are like people want to address. If we had a strong leadership group who is helping shepherd standards and the ERC20 standard, I mean, there's two ways to go about it. One, you could do things, slightly more closed source. That way you don't even have the issue of people seeing what these standards are before they reach a more thought out position. Obviously, there's issues with this, and, we could still do it in the open, but just not have it become even a draft ERC until it gets to a point where some people within this group have seen it and have done some vetting on it. That way we can kind of avoid some of these scenarios where people just implement the first draft. Or we can just keep doing as is, and I think we're going to keep running into the same issues that we ran into in the past, where people put whatever they want out there, and we have very fractured ecosystem of interface standards.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally there's been pushback against anything closed source when it comes to Ethereum. At least that's my understanding from their earlier all core devs calls before our core devs became consistently streamed. Another thing is, say, the committee of ERC, people reviewing ERCs, I think we should start off with just having ERC editor, and as there becomes more ERC editors, they can be the committee, because we don't have like core developers that are separate from EIP editors. Right now, the only people reviewing them are the ERC editors, which apparently we don't have any. So I think we should start off there, and then if they want to do their own call, that's on them, adding bandwidth to themselves. But
the issue is that being an editor is very different from being a person who's helping try and shepherd and lead standards. Just being an editor is just doing editorial tasks. These are things that most people can do with just a little bit of training and saying this is what an EAP is, this is what it isn't. Whereas looking for people to come in and say, here are the problems that we see interacting with applications in Ethereum. Here are some ideas of standards that we should try and flesh out to improve that. And, it's been 6 years of ERCs and we still don't really have any people who are kind of coming forward. And so I think it's sort of on us to try and help facilitate and build that out, because it doesn't appear to be naturally occurring.
Yeah,
I think what you're
in that case, I think the easiest way is to have funding for that kind of initiative and then seek out people that are willing to do that.
I think what you want is basically like platform architects, more or less.
Yeah, the issue is
At
that
level, yeah.
I don't think that money is something that's going to do any good, particularly for ERC editors, since they could easily just write the next hot token and make a few $1 million. I think that the only thing that we could offer is the prestige of being a part of a really important process in Ethereum.
I don't think I agree with that.
As of today, it's only $1 million, not a few million.
I don't think I agree with that either. I mean, I'm in a app level dev personally, and I mean, yes, I could code an ERC20 contract. I have no interest in I did not make any dog tokens. I have no interest in doing anything of that particular ilk. I think also the point that you mentioned before, Light Client, about shepherding is important. I think would also really play into funding. Something that I think would probably be more important for the ERCs than the core EIPs is having people of a capacity that are more shepherding than necessarily critiquing. A lot of the ERCs, at least personally that I've looked at, just literally need help, like maybe to explain to people what needs to change or to help them, especially if English is not their first language, through the process of even getting a legible, fleshed out ERC, and then to maybe shepherd them a little bit through the process. I believe that is well geared for a number of people who probably would not necessarily be in the position to launch the next hot ERC20 token anyway. And I also, to get back to what I was saying before, I wouldn't underestimate the goodwill of people who are in the space for the right reasons.
I think if I understand what Light Client's getting at, because we talked about this before, it's this weird intersection where you have people who are passionate about the work, and no matter how much you pay them, it's not going to change whether they work. So you got people like me, for example, who I don't get paid, but for some reasons, unbeknownst to anyone, I continue to help out and put forth almost all my effort into Ethereum. And then you have people that are motivated financially, and if you're motivated financially and you're capable within this space, there are more profitable things to do. And so we're kind of looking for specifically that set of people who are interested in making Ethereum better. And then of those people, the question is how many of them need financial motivation on top of that? Like, will that push them over the fence? And maybe there's a lot, I don't know.
Especially for the trading position, what I'm trying to argue is that I do think that would be useful. I mean, to use myself as an example, financial motivation in my personal case, I'd say it's not why I'm in the space, and there's a lot of things that I do for free, but it's definitely a lot easier for me when there is financial kickback for me.
It's because I mentioned finance because people that are competent, they're probably already busy, right? So having finances as an extra incentive, they'll probably put more priority over doing the work.
I'm just thinking in terms of, if we're trying to build great standards to create interoperability between the most important projects, to me, that means you need to get buy-in from the developers at Uniswap. You need Banteg. You need these people who, they're not going to be swayed by, hey, we'll give you 5,000, 10,000, whatever. They're not going to be swayed by some money to participate in that. And yeah, there are a lot of roles and important jobs that can be done by people who aren't necessarily leading big DeFi projects, but it can't be a group of outsiders just fully leading these standards, because it needs to be the people who are going to be using the standards at the highest level need to feel that they're part of the process, and that they're able to contribute what they think things should be.
So
I can
that's
imagine-
actually. Go ahead.
I can imagine like the people who the paid editors or paid reviewers or paid curators, whatever we call them, reaching out to those other groups for soliciting feedback. So I think Trent has been doing this lately for, I forget, 1559 or 3074, one of the two. And so just those people who are kind of the paid workforce of EIPs or the paid curators or whatever you end up calling them, I think having them can allow us to interact and integrate with those big projects. So I can appreciate what William's saying, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that if we have a group of people who are helping shepherd the process, and they are able to create, good channels of communication between those teams, that's basically what we're looking for.
I think there's a good chance. Yeah, I was going to say something very, very similar to Micah. Also, I think there's a good chance that would be the direction.
So there is another suggestion in the chat. Would it make sense to have an Ethereum standard organization or a smart contract standards body?
I think that's kind of what ERCs are.
Right.
In theory, yes. So the EIP process and the EIP process, I think, was meant to be kind of like a standards bodies, like ISO or RFC or whatever, or WC3 or W3C. It's just not quite as functional as them, is all. A little more dysfunctional at the moment.
I think something that could be really beneficial for the ERC process is just to create a separate initial stage before people open PRs and start writing out their ERCs. If there was a call where people could come and, it was 30 minutes or an hour, and they could just give a 5-minute pitch of their idea, and someone could just stamp it like, this is not an ERC, and just share. And, that they want to go ahead and make a PR, and they're like really persistent, sure, I'm all for allowing this, but I think that would stop a lot of people from coming in and just making whatever ERC they want to. And it's also like the first point of contact that we can start, understanding what are the needs of people, what sort of standards are people looking to create, use that and have synergy with other proposals, because oftentimes you'll have two similar proposals from different teams that don't really communicate, and there's no great mechanism other than just creating each to see what other people are thinking and wanting to do.
I'm curious who would leverage that service. There's a part of me that I don't mean this to be discouraging, but there's definitely a part of me that feels like it would be very helpful for the people there for the right reasons, and then it would probably also inspire kind of a wave of low effort, like the kind of low effort, low quality crowd that shows up when they can think they get someone else to do the work. I'd anticipate being on a certain percentage of calls that involve okay, so can you write me an ERC where you can make a contract with a token and it's worth 1,000 DAI always, or something like that. But it would be helpful for other people also. And it could be that the cynical vision is not correct here.
I think in the essence of time, I would like to summarize this particular item. But before that, I want to make a mention of it. Fellowship of Ethereum Magician, that team that they are looking into some or the other, process related stuff. with respect to ERCs. Maybe Catalyst can also contribute to that. And in that case, we can look into a proper process, not as, if not an organization, maybe focusing more on process. We'll try to discuss it in this meeting because we consider this as a process improvement meeting. We'll bring it there. But now, the example that I just mentioned about ERC 223, I believe the general agreement is until that is a standard, we should not call it as a standard. That can be something that people are free to refer to, but that should not be called it as a general standard.
Yeah, with a little minor adjustment to that, I think we should actively discourage people from running off with like drafts and saying, okay, it's a standard, I'm going to go implement it. Like actively discourage that because it has caused much problems over the years.
I would agree to that.
How can we actively discourage that though? Because right now, generally, once it goes onto the live website, there's just nothing that we can really do. People, no matter what we say, people are going to do it because it has a number in front of it and it's on an official website. And that's why I think that there needs to be a stage before it to try and help stop or at least get a more fleshed out version before it becomes live.
So in the past, what I've done is I have, back when I was doing ERC stuff, I just would, when people start, I see people referring to it, just tell them this is not a standard, do not implement this, or implement it at your own peril. Like, this is subject to change, and make that very clear. And that kind of helps at least a little bit. I'm not suggesting that we go out and start actively campaigning. Just when people approach us and say, hey, I'm looking for a standard on this, don't send them a link to a thing without a warning label that says this is not a standard yet, but maybe in the future this will be a standard. You could help participate by joining in the discussion. Also, doing more reviews.
Red backgrounds with the giant label at the top.
That'd be
introduction. For the official website, we can have a warning banner, and that should be sufficient. But I think this is an issue that other standards organizations have, where it's clearly in draft, and then people start doing implementations for it anyways. Like in JavaScript, there was decorators, which some projects in React started using, but they needed special libraries to use it. And I think Angular uses decorators, even though the spec was still being fleshed out and wasn't in final state. But I guess the JavaScript as standards, they're willing to do that just to keep the process transparent. But yeah, I think for the GitHub, I'm not sure if there's anything we could do other than write text and require text before it's in draft. But in the spec boat, it literally could be as simple as having a warning banner.
I like that. I like a warning banner on the EIP's repo for anything that's not final yet. It says, beware, this is not final yet. This is in this stage. If you want to learn more about what that stage means, click here.
Is that something doable? Can we do it on the present Ethereum /EIP?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it should just be someone who knows CSS and HTML. Basically, just needs to submit a PR to the EIP's repo on one of the templates. I don't know which one.
Does anyone from the present group is willing to own? I know, Alita, you are very much familiar with EIP's GitHub. Is that something that you would want to own? I mean, I understand you have other tasks as well, but I'm asking if there is someone who can own this. Is fine. If not, then we'll look into it later.
Yeah, I mean, do you mind kind of reviewing a little bit on what it entails? I wasn't paying 100% attention.
Just some HTML and CSS to put a little warning banner on the top of any non-final EIPs in the main web page. And the code for that lives in the EIP's repo.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I could do, for sure.
Oh yeah, I could send you an example too. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be pretty simple.
Thank you. I know we have only 4 minutes left, so I wanted to discuss about ERC editors, like what are the things that we are planning to do. But just in the sense of time, I want to touch upon any other item quickly that people would want to share. I see there is this item JSON RPC API spec. Is it something that we would want to have it on agenda on a regular basis? Because I know there are a lot of work going on in the background.
Yeah, I mean, I think having a follow-up on that is good. I guess kind of one pertinent thing to bring up is I created a bunch of issues and a project on the ETH1 specs repo. So if you want to see like the progress of the project, which is essentially 0 right now, then you can check there. But it's underway. Things are starting to ramp up more now that we've kind of come to a conclusion on how things are going to get done. And I'm just kind of going to assume I am the person and begin, more focused work. Anyway.
Quick question. Sorry. Yeah, about the open PR for the 1559 one. I saw, so Matt, you had 2 like basically typo comments, but aside from that, if I commit those in, is there anything else we're missing before we can merge this?
I think that it would look good to me.
Okay. I mean, we can make changes in the future, right? But yeah, okay. So I'll commit those 2 suggestions and I'll merge it so we can actually share that to people.
I still think we should rename the file before we merge it, personally, but I'm not going to die on that hill.
I think she already renamed it.
So I reverted the renaming, but the important thing to recognize with the renaming is that like I'm going to be completely revamping I'm going to be splitting everything up into like different files and stuff. Like that's the next step. So it's in my opinion pointless, but
well, I would caution against how you're going to proceed on this, because if you're going to start doing a lot of work on the spec, I think that work should be done from scratch so that we can license it CCO, because it is Apache 2 license, and if we just continue using this as a base, then we're going to put a lot of work into an Apache 2 project.
Yeah, it's annoying, but I agree with Matt.
Just copying the spec was kind of, to get the ball rolling ASAP and have a spec for 1559 stuff, but for the future work, I think that the first step is to, and I don't know, I don't think it's a spec, and so it's not going to look that much different than it kind of is already. But if you're going to write it from scratch, I recommend just doing your best to write it out from, clean, and then we can license it CCO.
Okay, that's fine.
Is there a way to, so I just merged it. Is there a way to host, like to have like a hosted version of the spec basically that we can link in the README?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
we just need,
it's pretty feature rich as well.
Yeah, it's I think you probably saw the link that I had put in a PR or something where you could pull up a full dashboard for it. I think it's just a matter of connecting with the right DevOps people at the EF to get a domain set up and then have continuous integration to deploy it.
Okay.
So I see over 100 issues that was created yesterday on ETH1.org spec repo. I personally feel that's a good way of keeping track of all the tasks that is being put in. But it was funny to receive more than 100 notifications in like 10 minutes. Thank you for all great work you're doing here, Rita.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I would prefer at least to vet it a single issue, because I think we should be cognizant that there are people watching these repos, and that's a lot of notifications for just some people to be getting. And I don't want to discourage people from watching the specs repo. This is really important place to keep up to date.
Yeah, I would kind of agree if there's a way. So it's not only the one-time notifications, and now it's done, like it might just be too much of a pain to change it, but it's also like the kind of order of magnitude difference between like everything else and that. So it's like kind of hard now to find, any other issue in the ETH1 specs repo. There's not a ton now, But yeah, I don't think it's worth necessarily closing the 145 issues because that'll just take a bunch of time. But yeah, I think in the future, if we could try to like group stuff and yeah, have a smaller total number, that would be good.
Right.
Okay.
I disagree with both. I think that it's a one-time cost to get all those issues created, but it gives us a lot more clean tracking on progress and allows us to distribute tasks and distribute work more easily.
Okay.
And we can just apply labels to them too if we need to filter.
Yeah,
that was-
the primary impetus behind the issues tracking is like in the case that we want someone to get on board because I'm not full time. So if you want somebody else or we want more or if you want to go faster, it's a lot easier to just kind of assign tasks and delegate.
Right. So initially I thought that there was some issue with the bot or something like that, but later on I realized these were all issues. Yeah, if that can be bunched, I mean, I also feel that it would be better, but now that is there, let's keep it, let's use it for the purpose of tracking. Okay, we are already like on time. Anything anyone wants to cover? I know there is another canonical source of EIPs that is listed for today's and EIP GitHub bot. So anyone wants to speak on either item? Maybe we can go a couple of more minutes and then we'll conclude the meeting.
I don't have anything significant on canonical EIPs.
Okay.
Does anyone here, Ruby expert? We got a GitHub notification from Dependabot saying that we've got a security issue we need to address, but I don't know Ruby well enough to analyze it.
I mean, it looks like it's just bumping a version of some of the gems. It seems benign to me.
You think we should just merge it and pray?
Yeah, I commented on it. I said I think we should just go ahead and merge and make sure that the site builds properly. I mean, it looks like it's just a minor change. It's a minor version increment, so I can't imagine it's going to break anything. But if it does, we'll just quickly revert it.
All right. If someone wants to do that, I'll thumbs up it.
You want your hands clean. I see.
That's right. I want my hands clean of this impending doom. When it turns out that Dependabot is injecting a backdoor into the EIP's repository, I don't want to be held responsible.
Okay. Okay. So the last item, I believe there were some action items from the earlier meeting, and Tim, you have created some pull requests for that. Want to say something about the?
Oh yeah. So yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I put a pull request in the ETH1 specs repo with all of the previous hard forks. Basically, I basically copied over the EIPs into that. I didn't want to merge it until people had a chance to look. It basically so it copies the text from the EIP. The only change I made is I linked back to the actual EIP. So I added a kind of metadata link field for every one of them, linking the EIP. Yeah, I know we discussed this last time, so yeah, I don't know. We can go ahead and merge it, but I just wanted to make sure people were at least aware before I brought all this in.
I believe your links won't work, so you'll need to fix that, or you want to fix that, I think.
Why won't my link?
Links? They're relative
they're
links,
not?
but yes. / EIP-100. Like that's not going to point at.
Sorry,
EIP.
where are you? Where are you looking?
Tim Becko's add historical forks to ETH 1.0
Yeah.
specs, PR number 52, first file, line 24 through 32.
Oh,
Those are all,
so
those are all links.
okay, that's it. Okay, got it. That's all the text from the EIP though. The link I added is line 9, basically, in that file.
I see.
Oh yeah. I'm not particularly keen on fixing every broken link.
They're all going to be all those links will not work right now. So my recommendation would be
right. Yeah, I know. I should
find all and edit's probably your easiest bet. They do look like they're well formatted standard files. You could probably do like a big grep across the repo.
Okay, yeah, good catch.
I I can comment on the PR. It's probably not the right place to discuss this.
Yeah, but okay, so this is why I wanted people to review it. Yeah, no worries, Mike. I'll leave myself a comment on the PR about this, and I'll fix it.
Thank you. So yeah, we are already over time. Thank you everyone for joining. We hope to continue this discussion on some of the topics that we started today, but we may not get on the conclusion. Hope to see you all in 2 weeks from now. Thank you everyone for joining today. Have a great one.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Congratulations, Matt.